In this session, we're going to talk about how we work the art of possible. And joining me is one of my favorite people on the face of this earth, Kenneth Berry. He's our Senior DevSecOps Engineer at Sumo Logic. I happen to be the CSO, SVP of IT, and all that means is that I'm lucky enough to serve and support a wonderful team. Let's start getting down into it. So what's the challenge and why are we talking about this today? Well, throughout the pandemic, there has been all this back and forth, trying to reopen offices, not opening offices. Did we change the name to campuses? How much space do we actually need? Are people going to come back in? Are they not? And for us at Sumo Logic, like you, we're a hybrid workforce. I know many people have gone full remote, but we believe in giving the flexibility to our employees that want to come in to have the opportunity to come in. Especially a lot of young folks out there, that this is their first job. How nice would it be to come back into the office and be around some people? Now, full disclosure, I've been remote for a long time, since 2009. So we have to be able to accommodate people in different types of modality as we move forward. But let's start thinking about how tough of a problem this is. We've done a lot of things out there to try to test and see, are people really going to come back in? Are they not going to come back in? Are we trying to force them back in? So let's all of us put on a real estate hat as executives just for a second. And how do you make these decisions? Like, how do you know how much office space you actually need? How do you know how many people are actually coming back in unless you're doing a manual count? How many days of the week, which are the days that are most popular in the week across multiple facilities within country or outside of country? So it's a very difficult problem. And we decided to use our own platform, as we always do, to try to help solve a lot of these problems. Data-driven decisions. That's what we're all about at Sumo, and that's what we're going to try to do moving forward. So 3 things I wanted to make sure I pointed out, because I'm sure a lot of us have done this. The first one is surveys. A lot of us have taken surveys. And as Ken and I discussed this earlier today, surveys helped you a little bit because people came forth and said, yes, I'll come in 3 to 5 days a week. But what we found a lot of times was they actually didn't come in 3 to 5 days a week. And I think that's happening globally to where folks really feel like they're going to come back in, but for one reason or another, they don't. So how are you supposed to make decisions based off of information that may not be factual? Second piece, everyone, and especially at an executive level, any type of person you talk to out there that is thinking through this, they're all trying to guess what the future holds. So is the pandemic going to stop? Are people truly going to come back in? Are they not going to come back in? Are there going to be motivating factors around a possible recession that are going to drive people back in? And it's all exactly what I just said. They're guessing at what's going to happen. People are going to want to come back together. No, people are not. They're all going to want to stay remote. Again, it's just a lot of guessing as to what you think is going to take place. And I know that for me and for a lot of my peers, we don't want to just guess. We want to try to get down to some facts and to some data when we start making these massive decisions that really propel our culture moving forward. Real estate's a very important thing, and it can be a very expensive thing as well too. So we really don't want to guess, and we don't want to rely based off of just surveys moving forward. So what did we decide to do? And by the way, RAW stands for Real Estate and Workplace at Sumo. So think of it like facilities. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of insight into our problem and solution. So Redwood City alone, 55,000 square feet. That's huge. So that's going across 3 floors, holds 439 Sumos potentially at capacity. Denver, 12,000 square feet, 81 Sumos. Austin, 5,000 square feet, a little bit less, 44 Sumos. Now let's look at the data. When you go below that, you start seeing that on average, just for the last month, and by the way, this is relatively close every single month, and we've been doing this for a while, we have 21 people or so coming into Redwood City. So think about that. 21 people when it holds 439 at capacity. And if you look across the other 2, sitting in Denver, you have 8, and then you have Austin 6. And by the way, a bunch of those people happen to be on our RISC team, which stands for Real Estate, IT Security, and Compliance. That are the ones that are coming in, because they're the ones that have to be there to welcome people when they come in. IT support, coming in as well too. And then we have security professionals that are there as well too. So those numbers are even yet a little bit skewed, but you can tell that now we're not getting so many people into the office. So how do we decide on real estate moving forward based off of these numbers? What would you do? So here's where we're going to start making this a little bit active, and I'll bring in my good friend Ken, part of our team. I started thinking about this as we had discussions at an executive level. And I just couldn't answer a lot of these questions. And I know that I put the cart in front of the horse a little bit by showing you that last dashboard, but the big one that stood up out to me was the first one, which was, how do I plan for real estate moving forward? Like, it's impossible. If people are saying they're going to come in 3 to 5 days a week and they're only coming in one or not coming in at all, how are we supposed to be able to build space around that? And then two that I posed to Ken, which you could read on your own. But let me introduce Ken at this point again and get his thoughts of what it was like. And I don't even remember the time frame, Ken, of when we first started challenging you with this issue. But give us your viewpoint as to what this felt like when you were approached to start building a solution.
Well, hi, thanks for the intro. I think the first question that came to me was specifically wanting to know how many people are in the office at any given time. I think that was it. That was the first question that I was getting, was how many people are in the office? I don't know. Go count them. And we started to think about how we could figure out how many people were in the office without tasking a human with doing it, so we could get accurate data. And I want to say, good grief, maybe it's been a year ago is when we first started asking that question. What we found was there were a handful of different ways that we thought we would be able to see how many people were in the office. I had built a tool to help facilitate people entering the office that tied several disparate systems together. It's kind of my specialty, is automation and tooling. And so I built a tool called Bouncer, and we could rely on that data. And as our needs changed, we found that we needed different sets of data. So we ended up pulling in data from a lot of different sources and folding it together to get a more complete picture to start answering these questions.
Yeah, and it's really funny that you started saying that without human intervention, like automating this quite a bit, which is the interesting part to me always, is how can we remove humans from, one, making mistakes, but then two, like maybe their opinions being involved in the answer. And so like this, I think that this chart that we're looking at, which is again, straight out of Sumo Logic, what did this tell you? Like how did you get started on the process? Because you said something very interesting before about a question that you asked our real estate people.
Well, so, I mean, I was asking this question just the other day. I'm remote in Central Texas. We have an office that's within striking distance of me. And I sent a message. I could have looked here, but I sent a message to just from people who are looking at this data regularly and said, what's the best day of the week? If I want to come in, rub shoulders like I used to do when I was in Redwood City, what's the best day of the week? And without hesitation, the answer was Thursdays. Thursdays are the best day of the week to come in. As you can see in the graph now, you see that's our most popular day. And Tuesday. What was really interesting is I do remember thinking that that our most popular day would probably be like Friday, just because traditionally we had the most fun stuff on Fridays. People would, I don't know why it was Friday, but people would stay late. And I anecdotally, I would have said before we had the data, Friday. And that was wrong.
It's so funny because I agree with you. I think on Fridays we'd have like more happy hours and things like that happening. And so again, I want to turn this around to what this means to me, like some of the questions you asked on your own and what this data means to someone like me. It meant that, well, we better have a better presence on Thursdays as far as like the food that we provide our employees, and just being able to have more support for them on those days. And then also awareness, so reports like this, which by the way, I get a PDF that Ken provides me every week, which is fantastic. Thank you for that I share with eStaff. That also just shows, hey, look, if you really want to rub elbows, like Ken said, Thursdays and Wednesdays, I would argue Wednesdays have been pretty popular too. Those would probably be pretty good days. What we're finding is Tuesdays through Thursdays, and again, all driven off of data. So now let's take a look at this one. And so you said something to me one day that was just brilliant. You always talk about the art of possible. So this PDF, this report that comes right out of our product on a weekly basis that Ken provides to me, and then I go over with eStaff. What made it the art of possible for you? Because I know you can do so much with our product, but why that?
Well, uh, so I guess at the heart of I describe myself as a data scientist nerd. And what's most important to me is making data consumable. So like it's fun for me. I can understand some, and there's some charts which George probably you want me to get rid of out of that spreadsheet. Um, but they stay there because I like them. But one of the things I try to focus on is making the data consumable, making it really easy to understand. I think is the most important thing to me. So one of the things that we wanted to, that if we're talking about these here was we had to do a little bit of engineering in order to show a year of data. So traditionally, I'm nerding out for just a half a second here, but usually you're limited to 30 days of showing a 31 or 32 day window of data in Sumo Logic, but the hacker in me did some trickery so that we could show a year of data in this dashboard because we wanted to see what the trend line looked like. When your days go from like a couple of people to double that between Monday and Tuesday, and then back down on Friday, it was hard for us to get a sense of like what's the average over a really long period of time, and we thought we would see something by looking at a year of data. And once again, we did not see what anyone guessed, which was that there wasn't really a trend line. If anything, it was we'd get these blips whenever there were structured events on campus, and then it would kind of trail off. Attendance would trail off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably what most people are seeing out there today is if you have a purpose-driven reason for being in the office, a gathering, it could be a development offsite, sales offsite, people are going to come in, which was interesting. But I also believe that the notion was once people come back to get that flavor, they're going to want to continually come back. And I'm still not convinced that that's true. I think that people will come in from gatherings because, again, I'm just going off the data that you've provided. We see those blips up, and then it seems to go back to normal pretty quickly with about the same relative numbers for about a year or so. And what I really like about these two is we're always looking for the delta month to month to month to month, and I don't think there's been that much of a delta month to month to month.
No, there hasn't been a delta from month to month. It's been essentially the same. For me, there were a couple of interesting insights. For instance, in the I believe on this one, the Austin office is the right, and our attendance it's small. The office is our smallest U.S. office, but the attendance has always been higher. And one of the interesting insights we looked at several months ago. I don't know if we ever presented it to you, George, but was looking at attendance by division and attendance by department, sort of getting like our certain teams. Strangely enough, the C-suite had really high attendance, and so did the IT department. But of course, I think they were required to be in the office.
Yeah,
So,
it's kind of funny because I do think like our executives, and again, maybe we're a little bit different. A lot of them like coming into the office. But it's also been a little bit different in the way that if I'm, let's say, Ken Berry and I'm visiting Redwood City, what am I really going to see? I'm going to get there, and unless there is that driven event, I'm probably going to see people either sitting in conference rooms or on Zooms. And so I do think that that folds into this a little bit, but I'm not sure. Again, this would be the guessing game that I talked about early and up front. I'm not sure how soon that's going to change. And so that's why I believe that this data is so important when it comes to starting to make decisions, because again, those are just simply guesses. So Ken, do you mind just sort of talking about like how this was constructed? Again, you being a data scientist, which by the way, I love those dashboards. I love the dashboards, and especially like the geolocation stuff. And at some point I want you to talk about that too, meaning look, the pandemic hit, and we're not unique in the way that a lot of people moved. In fact, we were just talking about it at the very beginning of this call that a lot of teams folks got up and moved. Some people said, hey, I don't want to be in California anymore. I want to move to Montana closer to family. And so one of the very important questions we had to ask ourselves is how far people are away. And I see that on that third bullet point to the right. That was super, super valuable to me and to the rest of the executive team. But I'll pause here and sort of let you talk us through this slide and some of the work that you did coming up with your own questions and then supporting other departments and data sources.
Sure. Sure. So there were, when you start looking at the data, I started to ask myself, what kind of stuff can I tease out? What kind of insights then I get from looking at it at a different angle? And immediately, because the first thing we were trying to solve was just how many people are in the office. And immediately after that was, can we get some insights about what teams? That was one of the early questions, was what teams are there? And, and so we started pulling a feed from our human resources data that would allow us to tie in more information about who it was. Because ultimately what we ended up settling on was, to enter the office, you need to use it's not a badge anymore, but we use our phones to get to open the doors. And we started just looking for those. And each of those is tied to a person, and we tied that ID to the HR data, and now we know that Kenneth came into the office and what team he's on and how far he would have traveled that day as the crow flies. And so we could start putting stuff together. We also needed to know, for instance, so that's HRS data, facilities hardware. I built another little tool that took where people were starting their travel from, their home addresses, and using an API found the distance in kilometers to all of our facilities, so we could start answering questions like to add the metadata to the person, which is how far are they from the office. By the way, George, I'm totally planning on upgrading that from as the crow flies to as the traffic is. We found a way to do it. We also rely on single sign-on to see, because as another way of confirming when people are, because there's geodata in the single sign-on. We had, just to mention it, we had originally thought about using access logs from our network gear. Fidelity wasn't good enough because people are going to be in meetings. They don't always have their laptops open. And we were getting enough from the door scans because everyone was scanning in. So as we pulled this data together, and occasionally we have additional data that we want to pull in, we started asking more and more questions. Eventually I was getting asked enough questions, and we were sharing the dashboard in I guess it was sort of entering alpha and getting into a beta form. And so what I did was I built a bunch of filtering in the dashboard so that non-technical users, let's be honest, it would be George's friends in the C-suite, could jump in and very quickly use the tool and answer simple questions or even complex questions. And we were able to do provide filtering. And as they add questions, we would make additional panels. Some of the questions are up on the screen, and one of the ones I probably should have grabbed a picture of it, and maybe not, but one of the ones that was constantly getting asked was, where does everybody live? Like, essentially, if we were to build a new office or put together a new location, what are the good places to do that where there's clusters of people? And so I built a feature. You'll see it says max distance 10,000. That's allows for the users of the dashboard to show everybody that's within that distance. No one's more than 10,000 kilometers. Show everybody who's within that distance. So, but also we could see clusters of people, and we hope to be able to provide the ability, again, little pet project of mine, for us to put in an address, and then Sumo Logic will display the distances of will flesh out the dashboard based on the new address. So you could actually say, what if we put it right here? How many people are within 30 kilometers of right here? And so we've gotten a lot of insight. Believe it or not, the dashboard actually gets used across quite a few teams to help them answer questions, whether it's the RISC team, which I'm on, or it's HR. It's being utilized by because of the comprehensive nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And finance as well too. And I want to make sure that our audience understands what they're looking at, because at the bottom, that's exactly what he was talking about that he built for. I feel like I got called a simpleton. I don't know about you in the audience, but when he said me and my friends on the executive team, he wanted to make it as simple as possible to be able to conduct a search. And that is like really, really cool that now a layman or someone that's not as technical could just jump right in, populate these fields. And again, whether it's HR, whether it's finance or someone on the risk team, and start answering a lot of these questions. So I think it doubled down on the power of Sumo, Ken, because outside of that, you would have either had to take what was canned and given to you, which there was a lot more information, or you would have had to really get in there from a technical perspective.
Yeah, and while these, I might have named these different myself, these are named what they are because the consumers of this is what they think of them as: employee status, manager ID. They are their fields. We were able to customize that for them.
What? So you actually went with what an end user wants instead of what you think was appropriate? Shocking.
Again, my focus is on making things consumable.
Well, thank you, Ken. We appreciate that. Okay. So look, that was a lot of information. I do appreciate the geekiness that Ken got into and all the work that he's done on this. And I really challenge you, like whether you're a leader or you're a practitioner, I can't think of a company that's not going through this right now. Even companies that have said, hey, we're going to be 100% remote, or we're going to drive everyone back into the office. I think a lot of people are guessing as to what the future holds. And we have a lot of data here that we can really help people make financially and responsibly sound decisions within the organization. So number one, partner with your HR facilities team to try to get the right data in there if you are a Sumo practitioner, which I hope there's some of you on this as well too, not just people at the C-suite level. But three things, to kind of keep in mind as you're thinking through whether or not you want to do this. The first one is you cannot predict future of work. I'm sorry. Everyone's tried. I've been reading on this for, better part of 2 years, 2.5 years, and it's just absolute guessing. The second one is everyone's survey driven. What are you going to do? What are you thinking? Are you going to come in 3 days a week? And if so, do you want your own office space? Do you want your own desk? And all those things are wonderful. And I think we need to keep on socializing those with folks, but they're not going to give you necessarily the data you need. Because again, I'll give you a great example. If I say I'm coming in 3 days a week, or Ken says he's coming in 3 days a week, and we don't, we either come in 0 or we come in 5, that just puts us at a disadvantage as we're planning workspace to be more efficient moving forward. And then finally, the last one is leveraging the right data sources, within Sumo to be able to come up with these decisions. Ken gave you a great list on the last slide. Everything from, HRIS to secure and lots of other things that can really help you, things that we never even really thought about bringing into Sumo under this kind of use case. So to me, this has solved a huge problem and it's ongoing. We're still working our way through this. Stay tuned because next year, Ken and I are going to do another session because I'm going to show you the actual decisions that we made. Like right now, we're going through a lot of change and we're making some decisions, but I can't share them yet. But next year at Illuminate, I guarantee you, we're going to take all this, give you the next version and some of the decisions we made based off of it. So I really want to thank all of you so much for attending our conference and for attending our session. Ken, thank you so much, for working on this and for partnering with me from a practitioner level to show folks how to get things done. Any parting words for our audience out there, Ken?
Oh man, keep on using the tools you have and make decisions based on the data.
Love that, and especially bring it all into Sumo Logic. So have a wonderful rest of the conference. Hope to see you out there in person again one day soon, and if not then, virtually. Take care.